You're listening to Thunderquack Podcast Network.
Hi, my name is Larry Lieber, and you're listening to the Epic Marvel Podcast.
Hello, and welcome back to the Epic Marvel Podcast. This is Amazing Spider-Man episode 3B, covering a period of the Amazing Spider-Man from 1967. This is also the second half of our look through the Marvel Epic Collection, Spider-Man Epic Collection, Volume 3, SpiderMan No More. I am your host, Curtis Findlay.
And I'm your co-host, Frank Martini.
And Frank, what issues are we talking about in today's episode?
So today we are going to cover issue 47 to 52 of Amazing Spider-Man. We will be talking about Annual 4 and Not Brand Echh issue 2.
And this is a really cool period for Spider-Man. As I was reading this kind of from the start to finish, I'm quite amazed at how much Romita changes throughout the course of this book. We talked about it in the last episode, how he was kind of a Ditko clone. He was trying to do a lot of his own style to mimic what Ditko was doing. But by the time we get to the end of this book, man, a lot of that has changed. The drawings are way more open and way bigger. That he uses fewer panels. He's getting away from the Ditko, 9-panel grid and stuff. And then Stan's dialogue kind of reflects that. He is not scripting as much. There are definitely pages where he over-scripts, and we'll point those out throughout this episode. But there are times when he just lets the action speak for itself as well. It's kind of cool.
Yeah, the main thing I think is that Romita said that when he got on the book, he always thought that Ditko would come back anytime. So he wanted to give the impression that the style remained in the Ditko spirit and vein, so that when he would return, the change would be not that impacting for people, because he felt that there was no way that Ditko would leave one of the most popular books in the Marvel universe back then. But I think that once he realized that Ditko would not return, he started doing more of his spirit, bringing more of his spirit and of his experience on both romance comics and the stuff he had learned from the Daredevil 9 or 10 issue run he had. So he really brought the best of both worlds, I think, and it starts to show in this volume. Once again, since in this volume we have the majority of the pencil is done by Romita himself, so we don't get, like we will get in the next volume, only layout and then finishing by someone else, or even in the volume right after, so volume 5, you have less Romita work because you have John Buscema filling in and then Gil Kane. So really this volume, so volume 3 and volume 7, so Goblins That Stand, is really the best you can get from Romita.
I really feel like you can tell that he is really crafting his own style here. And yeah, he started doing all this romance stuff, which he was good at. But I think the blend between the romance and the action really suits him well. He seems to quite enjoy it. And I also think that there's this cultural shift that's happening in comics just in general at this time, where the old style of comics, if you look at the golden age of Marvel going through the 50s and even the early 60s here, where they try to cram as much as they can into one page, we're now seeing with the rise of people like, Jim Steranko and Neil Adams and stuff, and John Romita too, where they are where they're changing the way panel layouts work. They're changing the way that stories are told through the action rather than with more emphasis on the dialogue. And this is going to change comics from now on, going through the 70s and leading into today. And Romita's playing a role in that, and we can see that forming in these issues here.
Oh yeah, for sure. And also, I think it's the main marker of the Marvel universe back then was Kirby, and Kirby's style has evolved a lot a couple of years before. When he reached Fantastic Four 45 to 50. Really, that's the moment. And Thor at the same time also changed dramatically. So with less panel per page, more splash pages, mixing genres, when with some Xeroxes put on the pages and then applying drawing and stuff. So really, it was a moment of change. And for me, that's really the moment when the Marvel universe exploded. And once again, 66 and 67 is the moment when the music was booming, with the best Beatles and Rolling Stones albums published around those times. Incredible music popping up everywhere. Art being more prominent, and with pop art especially. Fashion, the Batman TV show, all that at the same time. The Avengers TV show in the UK as well. Really something which completely reshaped the cultural world. So it makes sense that comic books were also following that trend.
Wow, yeah, what an amazing time for the arts is the mid 60s here. It's just incredible to think about all of that all together. And you can see it reflected here too, because we have Romita definitely, sloughing off all of the 1950s kind of style that Ditko was doing through his run. And the characters are way more up to date. They're speaking the ridiculous lingo. They're
Oh yeah.
Yeah. It's just this era is definitely reflected in this time. It kind of dates it a little bit, but at the same time, it's nice to read.
Yeah, because the dialogue is very, very tough to follow for someone who wasn't born at that time, I think.
Yeah.
And not in that country as well, which is my case. And it's very dated, and I don't think that comics would be that dated in terms of language in the 70s or in the 80s. Visually speaking, they become very dated in the 90s because you see this visual change, but not in the dialogue, I think. And here it's very specific of that era, and more specific, I think, to Spider-Man, because the Avengers, the Fantastic Four, they were less into that romance kind of thing, and the civilian aspect, the day-to-day life.
Yeah.
Was less visible in Avengers and in Fantastic Four. The X-Men were a bit in that vein because they were supposed to be teenagers and so on and so forth, but they weren't hip, if I may use that word. And I think it was where it was happening was Spider-Man, and we will see further afterwards that when we would be talking about protests, drugs, and so on and so forth, all that takes place in Spider-Man, which ties with what Dennis O'Neil and Neil Adams were doing in Green Lantern, Green Arrow at DC Comics, I think.
Right. Yeah, and if you think about all of the other characters in the Marvel Universe, they're really adults, and so they're not going to be into the modern scene as much as Spider-Man and his group of friends. Like, Daredevil is a lawyer, so all of his civilian scenes are lawyer scenes. He's dressed in a suit. Thor is a mythical character, that doesn't count, and Tony Stark is an industrialist. Like, he's a businessman as well, so he's always seen in a suit as well. This is really kind of the only place we're going to see the reflection of the era so heavily influencing the book.
Yeah, and actually, Spider-Man is the only teenager that, with the X-Men, but that went successful and going all over the place, because there was no clear direction on the book. So that really made the book be the clear focus of and the moment when the 60s were there. Well, it exploded for teenagers because that's what was happening in real life as well. And teenagers suddenly became a market domain, and that's the moment when young people really started to interest marketing and advertising, because they were started being consumers, because everything was booming. So all those guys born right after the war, they were suddenly at the center of everything, or a lot of things. And it's clearly reflected here.
That's probably why Spider-Man was catapulted to its stardom as it was, because
Mm,
being the only
yeah.
book that reflected teenage culture, and like all of these comic books were marketed and geared toward teenagers, but this is the only one where the teenagers would see themselves accurately, or I don't know, I'm assuming accurately depicted in the pages.
Yeah, I think that's that, and at least you can project yourself in Peter Parker because he had trouble, and he was not. He was never a true winner. There was always something, there was always a shadow somewhere.
Yeah.
So I think people could relate to that.
Okay, well, how do other people relate to it? I asked on Facebook for a bunch of comments here, and we have some comments. Let's see what we have here. On Twitter, Stefan says, has some great Spider-Man stories, an epic introduction to Mary Jane, and I love when John Romita takes over. My dad had comics from this era, and those made me love the character. I just wish I could get a reprint because I don't want to shell out $80 for it.
Sure.
Yeah, as of this time, as of this recording, this volume is currently out of print, and the people who are selling it on the secondary market have jacked up the prices. So I encourage everybody, don't pay those secondary market prices. I'm sure you can look around and see if you can find a copy at a comic book store or something if you do some hunting, or just be patient. This being such a formative volume for Spider-Man, it's bound to be reprinted. I can't see them not reprinting this one.
Yeah, me too. And I definitely think that the first 7 volumes of Spider-Man are the best you can, probably some of the best you can get, and they should remain in print one way or another.
John says this is a great volume, goes hand in hand with the 1967 cartoon. I just wish they had chosen a more representative cover instead of Annual number 3.
Yeah, well, I think that one of the ideas that Marvel has for this collection is to have as many characters and guests you can get for the covers. So the Avengers make sense in that vein, I think.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, they definitely favor the covers that feature other Marvel characters, so this is kind of the only option if they want to go in that direction. They also don't really want to use covers. I mean, there are exceptions like Fantastic Four Volume 3, but they don't usually use covers that are featured on other collections. So that kind of rules out a lot of the more popular covers like 39 and 40.
Yeah,
and number 50. Yeah.
Which was the cover of the Masterworks volume in which it was reprinted, so it was already used before.
Right, yeah, and that cover art is actually a bonus feature in this book, at the end of this book. So one other note about John's comment here, I found a Spotify playlist that is called SpiderMan 67, and it features all of the music cues from the cartoon series. All of the score wasn't written specifically for that show. They used a music library for that old cartoon. And the first 2 seasons used one library, and then when the production moved over to a different company for the 3rd season, they used a different library. And so this playlist has all of the music cues from the 3rd season. And so what I would do is I would put it on while I read these books. And it was really good. It was quite a great experience. It made me feel like I was watching the cartoon again, only with better artwork, because that cartoon was pretty abysmal in terms of the art.
Yeah, but that cartoon was iconic for the time, and it was on the air in France in 1977.
Oh, okay.
So that was my introduction to Spider-Man at the time, because it was, I don't know why it took so long to arrive in France, but when it did, it was huge. I mean, there was a peak of Spider-Man mania in France. You had 2 episodes every month in the French edition, so that was great. And the strip, also by Romita and Lee, was in the TV guide, the French TV guide. So all of Spider-Man was everywhere, and I was 4, and that's the moment when Spider-Man was everything for me. So yeah, nice. I definitely like this cartoon, even though it's corny.
Yeah, oh for sure, I like it too. Okay, so on Facebook, we got a bunch of comments here, a few quick hits. Christopher says John Romita Sr. is the greatest Spider-Man artist of all time, and he puts a little goat emoji. Steve says Romita all the way. And Arturo says Romita Sr. is my favorite Spidey penciler, so I think we're sensing a theme here. Here are some longer comments. Jamie says probably the best Spider-Man run, Romita full pencils, and Lee writing. Spider-Man demonstrates his true character by not joining the Avengers at the expense of Bruce Banner. And man, now that I think about it, Spider-Man took down the Hulk. There's first Mary Jane, Green Goblin reveal, the Kingpin, and possibly the greatest story, SpiderMan No More. That cover is iconic. Yeah,
for sure. A good summary of that collection. Yeah.
Yeah. When you break it down like that, it's like, yeah, it's just hit after hit. Lewis says a really great volume, big reveal for Green Goblin, great stuff with Kraven, the new Vulture, Blackie Drago, first appearances of the Shocker, the Kingpin. Smiling Stan and Jazzy John wrote some of the best comics ever in this volume, the pinnacle of Spider-Man probably. And I know that's tall talk, but man, it has everything that a Spider-Man fan could want. And lest I forget, it also has the return of the Lizard, only his second appearance this far.
Yeah.
And Phil says SpiderMan Annual 3 is the only time I can remember that the Avengers required a candidate for membership undergo a formal test. Usually they just had a probationary period. Spider-Man just had to be different.
Yeah, because he wouldn't join.
Yeah. And Matthew says, in my opinion, this is really where the Peter Parker stories got interesting. I found myself skipping through the Spider-Man action just to get back to the soap opera.
I think that's a very, very truthful comment, because that's exactly, I'm starting to read again Volume 4, and I'm almost skipping the action parts because the thing with Gwen Stacy and Mary Jane and so on, it's not more interesting, but it's what makes the action going on every month. While sometimes you get just a villain of the month, and it's not that interesting. So, yeah, I definitely can relate.
It's kind of how I read comics in general. Is I kind of zip through the action because it's hard to make action sequences be different or unique. They're kind of almost all the same. Same with the Marvel movies. I find that it's like, come on, let's get back to the plot, right? And Tom DeFalco has a famous saying. He says, people come for the fights, but they stay for the soap opera. And I think that's true.
Yeah, because when you read the comments, okay, the villains get mentioned, but not as much as MJ or Gwen and the romance aspects, and obviously the Romita art. Because if you zoom out of what we read, what you will remember from this volume is really the time when Peter went out of this bookworm era from the Ditko run, into a more social character and having the gang around him and so on and so forth. So it's really the socializing time for him. And that's what I remember when I see this book. What I have in mind is really this scene in issue 40. I don't know in which issue MJ is introduced to the rest of the cast, and they are all hanging. Yes, it's issue 44. Page 10, when they are all hanging out at the coffee bean. That's what I remember when I think of this era.
Right. Yeah, totally. One final comment from Will. He says, this is the run that gave us the Spider-Man we know today. Ditko and Lee's Spider-Man was popular, but Romita and Lee are the ones who sent Spider-Man off into the stratosphere of popularity. Plus, we get the first actual appearance of Mary Jane, who will always be Peter's better half to me. As good as the soap opera part gets, the only weakness Romita and Lee have were creating the A-list villains that Ditko and Lee did. Aside from the Kingpin, there are no new A-list villains in this run.
Yeah, it's true.
And I don't think that you need to have new A-list villains because there are so many good villains that Ditko created that you're going to want to bring back. And if you cycle through all of them, you just don't have time to fit in new villains. So yeah, there are a few of them that pop up, but I think they definitely favor the old ones that have become popular.
Yeah, because there are so many stories you can play, and also we have to keep in mind the fact that they were not used that much. I mean, when the Vulture is back here, it's maybe its second or third appearance.
Right.
The only villains that we have seen very much in the first run are the Green Goblin and Dr. Octopus.
That's true.
I think the rest of them only appeared once. maybe twice, and that's about it. So we have seen the Scorpion twice, Electro maybe just once. So there are plenty of guys that we haven't seen that much, and there are very good potential for them. So that's why we will see them more and more, and there is no need to recreate more characters.
And then when they do create characters like Kingpin and Shocker and Rhino, they are all characters that stick around. Maybe they aren't A-list characters except for Kingpin, but it's not like they disappeared. They're definitely part of the Spider-Man Pantheon now.
I must say that even though the Shocker has a cool costume, I wouldn't put him in the B list. I would rather put him in the C list.
Yeah, that's probably true.
But, that's just me, maybe.
Yeah. Okay, we can now dive into our next part of our episode where we talk about the issues, and we're going to start with issue number 47, In the Hands of the Hunter. This is the return of Kraven. And Kraven is a little upset because he thinks that he should get some of the big reward. So I mentioned in the last episode that they kind of forgot about that $10,000 or $20,000 reward. $20,000 reward that Norman Osborn issued to try and get rid of Spider-Man. They just dropped it. It was there for one issue, and nobody talked about it ever again. It's not Norman didn't even cancel the reward. They just dropped it. And I guess Kraven went after him in that issue and wants to get some of the money. So he's trying to track down the Green Goblin, he tries to track down Norman Osborn, but can't find him. And this is kind of a comedic series of events of him busting into these places where Norman should be, but he's just away. He finally tracks down Harry and tries to capture Harry and use him as ransom, but Spider-Man intervenes. And in the end, Norman does show up, and Kraven does try to kill him, but Spider-Man manages to save Norman. This was an interesting issue here because Norman comes back and he doesn't have any memory of being Green Goblin or anything like that, so he is very much a different character. This is definitely a continuation from the last time that we saw him in those issues 39 and 40.
I think the fact that we have Norman not being the Green Goblin really brings tension to every story in which we see him, because we don't know. We couldn't know at the time, and I tried to read that in retrospect, not knowing what, of course, I've read afterwards, but you're always like, oh, is the shock going to turn him back into his Green Goblin persona? Is it going to trigger something? And is the only guy who knows Spider-Man's secret identity. So that gives him something very, very special at the time and still today. That's the extra tension that the book is giving. I think that the Kraven plot, especially the first 2 pages, is a bit overcomplicated because in the first place, it was Norman who was approaching the guys with the money thing, but saying he was working on behalf of the Green Goblin. So that was originally a bit complicated before, but at the time we didn't know that Norman was the Green Goblin. So that could have worked. But now, I mean, those first 3 pages with the recap of that, which is, by the way, a retcon. Wow.
Right, yeah, because they're saying that it was the Green Goblin who issued the reward, not Norman.
Yeah, and Norman was the gopher.
Yeah, right.
And so it was the in-between guy. So that's the reason why it goes back to Norman not knowing that Norman is a Green Goblin, but he has forgotten. So that makes it very, very complicated.
Yeah,
2 pages. Right. So one of the rare times where there is such a tight continuity aspect so early in the 60s, and as I told you before the recording, I was reading Spider-Man Blue yesterday evening, and I think that the idea they came up with, and they got rid of that, and they just used the smell of the aftershave of Peter that Harry is wearing, which brings Kraven to the party and so on, actually was simpler and less convoluted than this part, I think.
Yeah.
I think there's an incredible moment here. It's Flash send-off party because he's leaving to join the army. And the extra tension also this brings is the fact that the main villain is crashing the party where there are so many people and all the cast is there. And it's a different vibe than just having two guys fighting on a rooftop. It's like when the Scorpion is attacking the Bugle. I think it gives an extra edge to the story, and I think it really works, especially because you have this super nice moment when everybody's having fun and everybody's dancing, and we have this Gwen showcase, really, really looking like Marilyn Monroe in my opinion.
Definitely.
So it's really the crashing of the party, I think, very literally there. So that's one of the good things of this episode.
I wanted to mention Stan's dialogue and how he's kind of still over dialoguing at this point. If you go to page 198 and 199, which is page 4 and 5, there's just so much dialogue in these pages here. And especially like there's the one panel on the bottom row of page 198 where Peter's talking on the phone to his aunt and Harry's there. And there's just so much dialogue there. It's like Harry's talking to Peter, Peter's talking on the phone, but Peter's also talking to Harry, and like so much dialogue. And you flip the page, and that top tier where Norman's talking to Harry and Peter, it's like, man, there's just so much going on. And then you flip the page, and it's like, holy cow, you're just inundated with all of these word balloons.
Yeah.
And the last thing, the one that I want to point out the most is on page 203, which is page 9 in the story, where Harry and Peter are in Harry's car, and they're stopped at a light, and they see Gwen, and then they have like this full conversation before Gwen gets in the car, and they're like stopped at the light. There's just so much dialogue. And that one panel in the middle where they are all in the car together, Stan puts so much dialogue in that one skinny tall panel that basically all of the art is obscured except for the small faces right in the middle. I can't believe how much dialogue is in that one box.
And especially because the top is just balloons.
Yeah.
I mean, and Peter is thinking of Molten Man and the Scorpion. I mean, there's no need for that.
Yeah, just like take out a few of those sentences and give it some room to breathe. And then that bottom panel where the gang enters the party, this is classic Stan. Every single person in this panel, even the people that are in silhouette, even the people that we don't know, they all have a line of dialogue in that one panel. Every single one of them. It's like, wow, they don't need that. But that'll change as we go through the rest of this volume and into the next volume.
Yeah, but this one is incredibly verbose. I mean, and I think maybe this issue would have worked better as a two-parter.
Possibly to just to spread it out a little bit more. Yeah, but at the same time, I don't know that I would have really wanted it to be just because most of this is just Craven looking for Norman. There really isn't a whole lot to the plot of this story. Stan just burdens it with extra dialogue that's not necessary. But I don't know that it needs to be 2 issues long.
Yeah, but maybe it's just the fact that there's too much dialogue, and that seems to be overkill in most of the pages.
Yeah.
This issue is apparently very important to a lot of writers because once again in Spider-Man Blue issue 6, it doesn't take place in the same environment, but it's the Flash send-off party is the moment when in Spider-Man Blue Peter and Gwen start dating.
I think they imply also that they sleep together, they hook up after that party.
Yeah, that's true. Which is something we have never. Well, there is maybe one panel much later which implies that. There is this issue. Then we have. I don't know if you've read Spider-Man Secret Identity by Chip Zdarsky.
No, I haven't.
No, Spider-Man Life Story.
Oh, Life Story, yeah. Yes, I have read that, yeah.
So the first issue also takes place in that send-off party. It's a different environment, but it's also at the same time, but it ties that and Amazing Spider-Man 39. So that's also one of the key moments. And of course, we have also the very funny Deadpool 11 by Joey Kelly and Pete Woods. where Deadpool and companion are, the blind lady who's with him at the time, go back in time to fix the continuum, and it ties with the character that was there at the time called Weasel. And Pete Woods did a great job trying to mimic the style and the look and feel of the time. And Deadpool replaces Peter in the issue. And Al, so the blind lady, replaces Aunt May, making a lot of goofy comments and saying weird things about Mary Jane being completely goofy and so on.
Yeah.
So it's a very funny issue, and it also gets some of the art of that very issue mixed with more modern art done by Pete Woods. So it's well worth giving a look at it because it's funny. I'm not that much of a Deadpool fan, but really it's a fun issue.
I've never heard of that before. Yeah, I'm not a huge Deadpool fan either, so I have never heard that. But I definitely want to check that out if it ties into this issue. That's very funny.
Yeah.
Well, why don't we keep on going over to issue number 48 now?
Yes, for issue 48, called The Wings of the Vulture. So the idea of this story is that in the first place, Stan Lee thought that Toomes, the original Vulture, was too old looking. So he's in his cell and is apparently dying. So there is this cellmate of his called Blackie Drago, who was his companion or a very good friend with him, so that he would reveal where his costume is hidden in order to take his place, escape and take his place and become the new Vulture, which is what happens. And as this unfolds, he starts committing a series of bank robberies and crimes. So obviously Spider-Man goes after him, but he's suffering from some sort of cold or flu and is very weakened from that, which leads to a fight in which he's very, very weak and gets defeated in the end with a final panel when Spidey lays down on a roof and just with the snow protecting him and possibly having saved him from a little fall from the stroke he received from the Vulture.
The back half of this issue is almost entirely a fight between Spider-Man and Vulture, and you can see that Romita is definitely starting to do his shift. Almost all of these pages are exclusively 3 or 4 panels, giving a lot of room to breathe. And what I like about this fight scene is that it takes place in the sky. Now, Peter Parker usually is swinging through the city, and we get a lot of these kind of, aerial view shots. But now it's taking place above even the skyscrapers because Vulture's flying high. And so we get a lot of really cool shots, and Romita gets to show off his perspective skills. So I like that. I think that was kind of neat. And I also really liked the pacing of this story because in the only 10 pages, basically 10, maybe 12 pages here, Romita introduces the concept of Blackie. He immediately turns on Vulture, so we instantly get to know what kind of character Blackie is. He is a man of no loyalty and no morals, and he learns how to use the wings, and he commits like a dozen crimes, all in 12 pages, and I didn't think that it was a rushed pace job at all. I thought it was paced really, really, really well, leaving room for a dynamic fight at the end.
Yeah, and the fact it's very dynamic because of the way he draws the Vulture's wings. I think it gives a great sense and great visuals in the pages. I really can't remember if Ditko drew the Vulture like that, but really that's extra dynamic and also I really like the helmet that he's wearing. It changes also the look and feel and the design of the Vulture. So really enjoyed it. There's not much to it, a lot of action, but the action is great. So I really liked page 19 when Spidey is about to fall and the center 3 panels where getting closer when the camera is getting closer and closer to Spidey. That's nice. That's great Romita stuff.
Yeah, it is. Nice, very cinematic. And then the very last panel where he falls onto the roof and you see Spider-Man's broken body. And because it's snowing, it's all covered in snow. It's all white. The panel's mostly white. So you get a hint of the perspective in the background where you see the other buildings over the edge. But the focus is clearly on Spider-Man, and like the camera is pulled back a little bit so you can see his full limp body there, and it really, really stands out against the snow. And so does the To Be Continued. I really like the way they end. And you also you mentioned the helmet. This helmet is part of the design that they use on the Spider-Man cartoon series. They decided to use the Blackie Drago design. They don't really talk about the identity of the Vulture in the cartoon at all, but they use this design,
which I find really neat. Really,
yeah. As far as there's not a whole lot to do with Gwen Stacy and the gang in this issue. I was quite surprised that because they were so prominently featured in the last issue, but they only really get one scene. What is it? Page 222 in the Epic collection. It's page 7 in the story where Peter just checks in school for a little bit. And that's really kind of it. There's not. They don't carry on the soap opera from last time like they did in the last issue.
Well, that's going to change because the following issue is very much into that. So that's a good mix and a good balance.
Yeah. So, well, why don't we go on to the next issue here, the last part of this little story here. Issue number 49. It's called From the Depths of Defeat. And this one's, you can see on the cover, starring Vulture and Kraven. This is something a little different because other than the Sinister Six, we don't usually get supervillain team-ups here. And it's not really a team-up. It's kind of a battle between Vulture and Kraven because Kraven sees on TV that Vulture has defeated Spider-Man, and being the egomaniac he is, he says, well, if he defeated Spider-Man, then I need to defeat that guy. So he goes after the new Vulture, and there's sort of a funny series of events where Peter is not really, or Spider-Man is not really in this issue much at all, because Peter's trapped in his bed under the covers in his Spider-Man costume because he's trying to make people think he's sick, which he is. And he can't get out from under his covers to change out of his Spider-Man costume because people keep on kind of checking in on him and coming in. It's really funny. Yeah. And there's a great scene where Gwen and MJ come to the apartment and they start to try to have a party right in the middle of their living room while Peter's trying to rest. So some nice character moments here. It was good to see that balance. And then at the end, of course, Spider-Man sneaks away and is able to take down both of these characters, sort of. And there's one page where he rips out the mechanism that Kraven has installed in his lion outfit so that the eyes of his lion vest shoot laser beams. I just think it looks like his nipples are shooting laser beams.
That's a weird weapon.
It is a weird weapon. And it's uncharacteristic, I think, of Kraven to rely on a weapon like that. Usually he's not about technology, but...
No, he would be using potions or darts or things like that. That would make more sense. And actually, it's Kraven who takes out the Vulture and not Spidey.
But it's kind of indirectly. I mean, he's aiming for Spider-Man, and Spider-Man leaps out of the way, and then the blast takes out Vulture. So, I mean, it's not an honorable defeat.
One funny thing, page 248, I've read that in the beginning, Stan Lee didn't want Romita to draw Spidey too muscular or too good looking and so on and so forth. And on that final panel, look at the six pack.
Yeah, he's built, that's for sure.
Yeah. So definitely, I think that the specifications were out of the door at that time.
Yeah. Overall, this 3-parter was okay. It was nice to just get some new villains like Blackie Drago and seeing the villains fight each other. But overall, it's not one of the highlights, I think, of this volume. For me, at least. There's definitely better stuff. How can you compare to the Green Goblin stuff and the Kingpin stuff that's coming up?
Yeah, it's more of a, not villain of the month, but it's traditional fights.
Yeah.
And here, especially, I think the romance moment and the things that takes place in between the fight scene may be more interesting than the fight scenes themselves, which will not be the case when we are talking about the Kingpin,
right,
or when we were talking about the Green Goblin earlier.
Yeah, for sure.
Or the lizards. Oh
yeah, the lizard stuff was really good too. Yeah, there's so much great, and I mean, and this stuff isn't bad. Like, it's still a good, entertaining story, but compared to the other stuff in this book, it just doesn't hold up as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So issue 50 called SpiderMan No More. So the issue starts with Spidey stopping bank robbers, but yet still being feared by the people he just saved. And then it goes on with Aunt May being sick again. And then because of one of those lectures that JJJ often give on TV, well, he decides to call it quit and to ditch his costume in the trash and give up being Spider-Man. And the rest of this issue is really Peter enjoying his life as not being Spider-Man and being more himself, giving up some things like working for the Bugle, deciding to be more open and more, maybe hitting a bit on Gwen, enjoying the life, and yet obviously towards the end of the issue, something reminds him of his responsibility and his powers and the connection between the two of them, and so he gets back being Spider-Man, and it's obviously a fantastic issue. Because it's, I think it's a great character development for Peter compared to the when we had in Volume 2, we had this issue when he gave up being Spider-Man once, but it felt like he was obliged to, or because he was afraid. But here it feels like he wants to live his life and he wants to not get the burden of being Spider-Man anymore, and he truly enjoys it. Well, he feels, and obviously in the end, he feels that he has to go back being Spider-Man because of the responsibility. But it really feels like he wouldn't mind not being a superhero anymore.
Yeah, I feel like this is an actual ongoing theme for Peter, that he really wouldn't like to be a superhero. It's just kind of it was thrown into him and thrown upon him, and this is who he is and what he has to do. There's the one scene on page 15, on page 272 in the Epic collection, where some people are getting mugged on a rooftop, or a security guard is getting robbed or something, and he can't help but help them. He has to spring to action. It's like something is in him calling him to do that. And that's who Spider-Man is. He doesn't really, he doesn't want to be Spider-Man, but he is Spider-Man, and he can't help it.
What I really enjoy about this issue also is that because he quit, well, the mob is getting organized and doing more hits on banks and stuff. So it really feels like there are consequences to that, because there are not so many human heroes at the time. I mean, basically you have Daredevil and Spider-Man, and that's about it. So that means that if someone like Spidey is not there to prevent those kind of robberies and mean stuff happening, well, they will have it's open bar for them, and that's what happens. So clearly you see that even though the event of the security guard that reminds him of Uncle Ben triggers the fact that he has to go back, I think that eventually he would have been felt obliged to come back because of his sense of responsibility, and because no one else is doing it.
It's
because
true.
The Fantastic Four are not the Fantastic Four or the Avengers are not going to stop a couple of goons attacking a bank.
This issue also, I think, features the origin retold, possibly for the first time. I can't remember. Yeah, I'm surprised. If you read like those early Fantastic Four issues, they retell the origin all the time. But we haven't really had a retelling of Spider-Man's origin story in Amazing Fantasy number 15 for forever. Like, this is, to have a 50-issue gap where they don't tell that story is odd for the 60s, because, they didn't reprint things all that much, and you couldn't find back issues as easily, and usually they did this kind of thing on a regular basis.
Yeah, it's retold in Amazing Spider-Man 1, but that's it.
Right.
So, 2 issues in a row, and then no more for 50 issues.
But it's great to have that for an issue, a landmark issue like number 50.
Yeah, totally makes sense. And it's not yet the time when you would get double-sized issues and stuff like that for key moments like that. But at least it's a memorable issue there.
Right. And the first appearance of the Kingpin, hey?
Yeah.
Pretty great to see him come in. I mentioned in the last episode that Rhino was the only Romita character to make it into the cartoon, but Kingpin's there too. So I forgot about the Kingpin.
You see that in this issue, the Kingpin you see is not yet fully established visually, but that changes completely in the next issue. And from now on, the Kingpin you see is the Kingpin we have always seen. His face is slightly different. His look and feel is not yet there, but definitely you get the feeling that this guy is not to be. You have to take him for serious. And I like the play that Foswell is trying to make. So we finally see that plot also moving on, because we have seen him as a kind of shady character. You don't know if he's really trying to be part of the working with the police, working at the Bugle, having a different persona and so on. And now he's making his play. So he wants in with the Kingpin, and he wants to go back to being in the crime business. And that's interesting also.
Does he want to, or is he kind of trying to go undercover for a story?
Oh, that's a good point. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know that they ever really explicitly say, but especially with what happens. Well, maybe we'll talk about it in the coming issue here, because some stuff happens with Foswell that we'll need to discuss. So let's circle back to that one in a little bit.
I think we were talking in the previous episode. We were talking about Spider-Man Blue.
Yes,
and I think that page 13 really ties into it. You know, the scene when Pete is with Gwen,
right?
And they're both on the bike.
Yeah, there's the bike scene. And this is the first time we get Gwen's views on Peter, which she has just that one little thought balloon that says, "Oh, you lovable blind goof, can't you see that I do?" In terms of, I do mean that you were missed at the party or whatever. Like, she does have feelings for Peter, which we haven't had those words from her mouth yet. So that's a new revelation in this issue. Okay, I think we can move on to issue number 51, In the Clutches of the Kingpin. Great splash page here, introducing this character who we met in the last issue, but like, this is who the Kingpin is. He rules the city with his fist, and nothing will get in his way. He thinks he's defeated Spider-Man. And we find out his plan here. He's going to take control of all of the mobs in New York so that he is literally the kingpin of crime. And of course, this is something like, this is what he's all about forever in the comics. This is his thing. And so to have it established like this right away, to come on the scene already in charge of everybody, is quite remarkable. Like, he's been behind the scenes all this time, and now he's just here. And he's here to stay. And so Spider-Man, throughout this issue, gets hints of something happening, something brewing in the underground, and is trying to find some clues. He gets the name Kingpin, but doesn't know what that means. Foswell is working with him, working with the Kingpin, and they kidnap Jonah and bring him to the Kingpin. And this is all set up for the next issue, where the two of them, Spidey and Jonah, get placed in a death trap and have to escape. There is a lot to love about this issue. I think the Kingpin's first appearance here, his first full appearance, is just fantastic. He is such a commanding presence visually, and the way Stan dialogues him is really great. And then the twist at the end of this issue, where we find out that Kingpin can actually hold his own against Spider-Man 2. Like, this is, it's quite wild. It's a really great introduction to a villain.
Yeah, because the one of the things you would imagine is that with his build, it wouldn't be so much of a foe, and you already see that from page 8 when he takes a guy and fights him and gets rid of him very easily. You see that he's quite the formidable character already, but then, yes, at the end of the issue, you see that he's completely capable of fighting Spider-Man and getting the best out of him.
Yep.
And he has this amazing design. I really love the way that Romita established his look and feel. Because he's very well dressed. He's using this cane. He has tricks in his tie or something that he has around his neck. So not only he is quite a powerful character, but also he's a very clever one. And you get that from his first full appearance. That's neat, I think.
It's really good. It's a brilliant character that will be so important, not with just Spider-Man, but with Daredevil and with Punishers. Like, I can't believe that this character, starts so well established and well thought out. It's really great. And I love the interaction between him and Jonah as well. And just when Jonah is blindfolded throughout half of this issue and trying to figure out what's going on, there's just a lot to love with the way that this issue is written. And we also get, I think, the first appearance, although he's not named, of Robbie Robertson on page 287. There has been a black guy working at the Bugle for the last, even the last several Ditko issues. Ditko drew a black guy kind of just in the background, and it stands out because most of the time these comics are just completely full of white guys. Like, there's usually no black guys in there. So when they do draw one, it's noticeable. And so I noticed that in the last several Ditko issues that there was just a black guy at the Bugle. And now he's sitting right here beside Jonah in his office. And I think it's in the next issue that they're actually going to name him and say what his title is.
Yes, it's in the next issue.
Yeah.
And it feels like they have finally established hair color for Ned.
Yeah, I think so. It looks like they're going to actually develop him a little bit more as well, because he is starting to get into the action following leads for crime stories, which were usually Foswell's. But with Foswell gone missing because he's with the Kingpin, somebody's got to follow up on the crime story leads, and I guess that's going to be Ned Leeds.
We only see the girls and Harry for a couple of panels here compared to other issues, which means that the focus is clearly not on them. But yet, we see that MJ has clearly seen that Gwen has taken an interest for Peter, and she's starting to have those little jokes, innuendo kind of things about it, and it gives more depth to the character. So she's not only this crazy dancing girl. She's there's more than meets the eye.
Except I think that she's still written as if she's just carefree, and it doesn't matter what anybody thinks. She is her, she just does her own thing and such. She's all about the dancing and the parties and whatnot. I feel like they need to go a little bit more in depth with her character in order to make her a little bit more likable. Right now, she's just a little too, I don't know what the word is.
I think that the fact that she always said lots of fish in the sea is what defines her.
Yeah.
And so she wouldn't get attached too much to people. And it wouldn't be until Tom DeFalco wrote, retconned everything about her and explaining that she knew explaining that she knew all the time that Peter was Spider-Man and the family aspects and so on and so forth, that you could see her in a different light, and read those stories with that in mind, with that retcon in mind, would give her a different spin. But yes, she's not that much of a likable character at the time.
Yeah. Okay, moving on to issue number 52.
Yeah, so issue 52, which is the last Amazing Spider-Man issue of the volume, called To Die a Hero. So it starts with a classic Spider-Man trope, Spider-Man and Jonah being trapped together. We will see that happening very frequently, and it's always nice to see. So they are trapped together in a room which gets filled with water. So that's a trap for them to die, and which is kind of silly in the first place. But let's not get into that. So obviously, Spidey manages to find a way to have them escape and confront for the second time the Kingpin. This time with a better ending for him, but as the Kingpin escapes, his goons are still there, and in the confusion of everybody running around and so on and so forth, Fred Foswell takes a bullet that was aimed for Jonah and dies as a hero, which gives the reason behind the title that we have for this issue. Spidey getting a win in the end, but with some important loss and something that is new, because Foswell was a very well-established character. So it's one of the rare times when we see a very well-established character dying and having a very meaningful death, I would say.
I was surprised at this, actually. I've never read this two-part Kingpin story, and I knew that Foswell died somewhere along the line, and I didn't know that it was under these circumstances. So it was a nice story to read in that aspect, and yeah, surprising, because this is a character that we thought had been redeemed, and then turns to be a bad guy, and then ends up redeeming himself in the end again, this is the reason why I think that he was not really a bad guy with the Kingpin here in the first place, because he never really turned. The fact that he was still willing to protect Jonah in the end tells you he was never really a bad guy ever since he reformed. And I kind of think he was just trying to get into the Kingpin's into his circles in order to get the story or get some information and such. And it just kind of went not the way he planned. I also think that it's odd that they chose to kill him off, because he'd been building up this whole following Peter around and like putting the pieces together. And even like the issue before this, he says, or in issue 50, he thinks to himself, Peter quits being a photographer the same time that Spider-Man quits being Spider-Man. I wonder if that's a coincidence or something. Like, he's close to actually figuring it out, but then all of that just gets pushed to the side because they decide to kill off his character here.
Yeah, it could have been an interesting subplot to keep on the book, even though there was already something in that vein a few before, the one where Peter finds out that Foswell is following him, and he plays this comedy act.
But that's what I mean. He has this whole subplot that's been going on for issues, and it was still going on. Like, even that trick that Spider-Man did in that issue didn't stop Foswell from thinking about it, because he still kept on thinking about it even as recent as issue number 50. And then, they just write it all off. I think it would have been great to have him stick around and follow him and get closer and closer and eventually figure it out.
Yeah, could have been a very interesting character development for sure.
Maybe in a different timeline in the Spider-Verse that happens.
Yeah. In this issue, Flash is back.
Right.
Like, he was gone for 2 issues.
That war, they're very, very efficient with their wars. They can do them in 2 months. Yeah,
I was really surprised to, it's not really explained where he's going and what's happening for him. He just goes back and forth regularly in the book.
They do name it, though, in this issue. They do specifically say, he says on page 13, it says, you must have heard the Viet Cong wanted to sue for peace as soon as they found out I was there. Mm. So, he was definitely overseas in Vietnam.
Yeah, but when you think of the time frame of an issue and at the time roughly, it really feels weird. Like maybe he was gone like for 2 weeks.
Yeah, especially when you read it in a collection like that.
Wise, yeah. Comic book time wise, it would have been gone like 2 weeks. Obviously, publishing time wise, it doesn't. It works a bit, but at the pacing, you're supposed to the time takes place in comic book time. It's a bit weird. To have him back. But hey, I don't really know how the system works, so maybe it makes sense at the time.
But this is a big turning point for Flash, because he has left his kind of high school bully days behind him. And now, especially on the same page on 13, there's the scene where Gwen says, as soon as Pete gets here, I'll arrange the zingiest wingding in town. And Flash says, Parker, you gotta be kidding. He can empty a room just by entering it. And Harry says, come on, Flash, Pete's a good egg and you know it. And that right there is the turning point, I think, for Flash, because now his friends all like Peter, And he's gonna he kind of likes Peter too, and he's not gonna put up his his front about that anymore.
Yeah, so that really gives a different. I mean, really, once again, it's just been a year since, a bit more than a year since Romita took over the book.
Yeah.
And look how different it is.
Yeah.
I mean, it's completely another character, another set of characters, the around him, another vibe. Everything is completely changed. And, some like the Ditko stuff better, but for me, that's my Spider-Man right now.
Yeah, I can't imagine what people were thinking when they were reading this, and they're like, man, all of these characters are so acting out of character. This is not my Spider-Man anymore. Were people actually thinking that, or were people loving this and really embracing the change? I have no idea. I have to maybe read the lettered pages to find that out.
The thing is that the sales were definitely picking up.
Yes, that's true.
And so that gives you an idea, because at the time, Fantastic Four was the top-selling book at Marvel, and with Romita arriving on the book, then the sales picked up and would lead to the fact that Amazing Spider-Man would become the best-selling book at Marvel. So definitely the feeling and the vibe of the book made it work very well, sales-wise. The last 3 issues, we had Mikey Dimeo, Mike Esposito being back on the book, and yet it doesn't. It's completely different from the previous issues where it was working. I think you hardly see the difference, and it maybe the Romita's pencils were very tight or something like that, but it really enhances the Romita art, in my opinion, especially in this issue, which is really, really great looking. So the combo, the Romita Esposito combo works really well in this issue.
I think so too. I don't think I like it as much as Romita inking himself, but it still does a good job. Actually, did Dimeo do issue 50 as well?
Yes.
Okay, actually, then I take it back, because I really, really liked the look of that issue, especially that splash page with the Spider-Man costume in the trash, like that. Oh, the only person that can do a better, moodier New York City is Will Eisner. Really.
Yeah, it's true. It's true.
Okay, so Amazing Spider-Man Annual number 4, King Size Special, The Web and the Flame. This is a big issue because there are no reprints. It says right on the cover, not a single reprint. And they tease us as to who the artist is in this issue here. Right at the very beginning, they say, what does this box say? Mystery lovers, we've got a goofy new treat for you. All we're telling is that our little leader Stan the Man Lee scripted this yarn, Mickey, ever delightful Demio, did the inking, and adorable Jerry Feldman did the lovable lettering, but we're keeping the penciler's identity a secret till the end. Why they do that, I have no idea, but they do. And we find out, should we spoil it now for them? We find out at the very end of this issue that it is Larry Lieber, Stan's brother, Larry Lieber, who does the penciling. And Larry is an interesting guy because he did a lot of writing for Marvel. And in the 50s and such, he did do a lot of the penciling his own work and such. But once the Marvel age ushered in, he really didn't do much penciling at all.
He co-created Iron Man, though.
Yes, but through the writing, he did.
Yes.
Yeah, he did writing for Thor and Ant-Man and Iron Man and such, but he never did penciling. So to have him do this whole annual, and he does the next annual as well. It's actually kind of a rare thing at this time. And then eventually he'll take over the Spider-Man newspaper comic strip, and which he drew up until very recently when they canceled the strip.
Yeah.
And
I think he was still working on it, yes.
I have 2 interviews with Larry Lieber that I did. And one of them we talk about the Spider-Man newspaper comic strip, and he says that his run on Spider-Man was the longest consecutive run as a Spider-Man artist in Spider-Man history. He was a Spider-Man artist longer than anybody. I mean, he was only doing, the 3 panels at a time daily, so it's not the equivalent of a monthly book, but still, he was associated with the character for the longest unbroken streak, which is pretty good brag there, I think.
Yeah.
Okay, so this issue here is one big story with a bunch of backup features where Spider-Man and Human Torch gets suckered into being part of a movie. And it turns out that the movie is just an elaborate plot by Mysterio and the Wizard in order to try and take down the two villains, pit them against each other so that they will kill each other. And of course, that doesn't end up working. They team up in the end and take down the villains. And that is kind of the whole issue. It's actually not that great of an issue, not that great of a story.
Oh, it's super bad.
I was being nice.
No, you're reading this great Kingpin story, and suddenly you have this thing which is 40 pages long and feels like a 62 Strange Tales reject.
Yep, right. I think so. That's what it is. Yeah, Wizard, of course, is a the Wizard is a Human Torch villain from the old Strange Tales days, teaming up with Mysterio, a Spider-Man villain. So we have villains combining to fight their respective heroes. And it's just one battle after the other, and none of them have any sort of real consequence. They're all kind of goofy. And Larry, he's a pretty good artist, but he's just a little stiff. And I think that Demio actually picks up a lot of the slack, because a lot of the drawings turn out to be very Romita-ish. And I think that's because Mickey Demio is trying to add a little bit of continuity to Larry Lieber's pencils. Because if you look at Larry's work from the 50s, I mean, I know there's a lot of growth that can happen between the 1950s and now, but he wasn't drawing a whole lot. And if you look at his style in the 60s, it is very, very different than what we see here. It's quite strange, especially when he's inking himself. He's very, very unique and stylized in his approach to drawing. And I think that Demio does a lot to smooth over a lot of that.
I'm wondering if sometimes Romita is not doing a few panels here and there. Because, when you look at page 338, and you see that that first panel on the left part of the page, that guy at the bottom and so on, it looks more Romita-ish. It looks like a Romita panel to me, even though it's not finalized and it doesn't look like Romita.
Just with the staging, you mean? With the up-close person in the foreground and stuff? Yeah, that is something that Romita would do.
Yeah. I think there are a few pages where it looks like Romita may have done a few faces, like he would do in other books, like art corrections, things like that.
Right. Yeah, that's possible. And the other thing is that it's possible that Larry would swipe from other people as well, because I think he did that here and there.
Yeah.
He used a lot of reference in his drawings. If you listen to the interview that I do with him, he actually talks a lot about how he never looked at himself as a good artist. He struggled a lot with drawing. He was really slow to make it look right, and so he used a ton of reference, and which is good, and did his best. But I think you can tell that he's definitely a little on the weaker side.
Yeah, and
the last panel with Peter falling asleep at the end there, that totally looks like Romita. Yep.
Yeah, definitely Romita to me as well. So, I mean, when you compare with the pages with that kind of monster that we see, it really feels like it's two different artists.
Yeah, the monster is kind of Kirby-ish in its design with those teeth and such. And
very 50s also.
Yep, definitely. Very true. Yeah, overall, it's too bad that it's such a big part of this epic collection because it has so many pages because it's not that great. And then you flip the page and we have a 2-page spread of the coffee bean barn, also drawn by Larry. But man, these drawings look like Romita, like the faces and such.
Oh, yeah.
Like
the first time I read that,
yeah.
they were taken out of the annual and they were used in a French magazine that I read when I was a kid, and I was 100% sure those pages were drawn by Romita.
Yeah, definitely, you'd think so, but it's apparently not. It's apparently all Larry. But this is a nice splash page. I think this is the first time the coffee bean barn is named.
Could be. And there are very funny things in the background and the things which are written, Fu Manchu for mayor and so on, free espresso for 2 or 50 cents rental for the cup and so on. I mean, this is really Stanley having fun.
Totally.
And it works very well, I think.
And then the next page.
I love these bonus pages.
Yes. Yeah, it's great.
The next page with the mask and the way the mask is working, the cartridges, the way the way the web spinner is working and so on and so forth. I mean, when I was a kid, I read that to death, really, because it was such an eye-opening thing for me to know how why the spinning would be different. So it explained all that. It makes absolutely no sense at all, but when you're a kid, this works so well.
Yeah, it's this kind of thing. Like you tap it once for a thin web line. You hold it down for a thick ball of mush, and then you tap it briskly. What does it say? A series of brisk staccato taps releases multiple cables to make a net pattern. It's like, yeah, that kind of stuff is like, it's never talked about in the comics at all. So it's kind of neat to see that. But you think about it, and it's like, I don't know how that works. Peter's definitely got a very good engineering background in order to come up with his web shooters that do all of that. It also reminds me in the early days of Thor when they were trying to establish he taps the hammer once to turn into Thor, he taps it twice to call thunder, he taps it 3 times to make a storm.
Yeah.
And then you turn the page and you get how his wall crawling ability works. Not really how it works, but just all of the cool things that he can do. The real pleasure is reading the goofy caption boxes through all of this that Stan is putting in, because he's got a good sense of humor as he goes through all of these things that Spider-Man can do.
Mm-hmm.
And then on page 370, we have a pinup of Spider-Man holding up the rest of the Marvel Universe. And I think that's kind of funny, because I wonder if it's like a little commentary on the rising sales of Spider-Man. I think some of this is drawn by Larry as well, but he's obviously kind of cutting and pasting the characters from other books.
Yeah, especially the Hulk. It really looks like a cut and paste.
Yep, and
today you would call that bad photoshopping.
Yeah, totally. And I think he does the same thing for this splash page with the villains as well. I can't say for sure, but I'm pretty sure that they're kind of cut and paste also.
Yeah, because I think that the Electro is a Ditko swipe.
Yeah, I think the Vulture is too. Oh no, the Vulture's got the face mask on, so maybe it's not. I don't know. Yeah, they look familiar.
Yeah, but it looks weird. I mean, it looks like he has no neck. The Vulture is especially weird looking.
Yeah, it's a weird angle.
And Doc Ock is a swipe also.
Okay. And then you flip the page again, and we get a little inside view of Peter and Harry's apartment. And Peter has all of these dangerous chemicals on his desk. It's probably a fire hazard or something, just to leave things bubbling like that all the time. He probably shouldn't. And I like that they have a cabinet in the middle of the floor, and it says, "We're not sure, but we suspect this is where they store their ever-growing collection of Marvel comics." As every good apartment should have. So yeah, these are fun pages. Yep.
Yeah, great page. And apparently they have no kitchen.
Oh yeah, right. Well, no, there's one side door. I guess that's the door to Peter's room. Yeah. So I guess there's Harry's room is the far door on the wall. The middle door is probably a bathroom, and then Peter's room. But yeah, no kitchen. Poor guys, they have to eat out all the time at the Coffee Bean.
Yeah, possibly yes.
So this is the page where we find out that Larry Lieber is the penciler, and it also says, "We want to tell you 1 year in advance that our 1968 Spidey special will feature the long-awaited mysterious saga of Peter Parker's parents." So that's exciting. It'll be penciled by La Rupin Larry and inked by old Ring-a-Ding himself, Romita. So there we go. And then it says, "See ya then, Pussy Willow," which is, of course, the running gag from from Aunt May. I said I was going to point that out, and there it is. Okay, any more comments about the annual?
Just one thing. I didn't really like the lettering on the main book, on the main story, and I really feel like it changes in the bonus pages.
Oh, for sure, absolutely.
So it's
yeah, it's definitely somebody else because of just the way, just the lettering itself is totally different.
Yeah, and there's so many bold used in the lettering of the annual that for me, I really didn't like it. So I'm not familiar even with the letterer's name because, I don't know what he did then, but for me it was Sam Rosen or T.C. Mac working on the time on those books. So it felt strange to have someone else, and it doesn't feel like a regular Marvel comics of the time anymore. It's really strange.
Yeah, I think you're right. Definitely different. Okay, the last thing we have in this book is Not Brand Echh, number 2, a story from number 2. This is a parody comic that Marvel put out in the 60s that kind of made fun of their heroes, and as we'll see in this one, they make fun of the DC heroes as well. Peter Pooper, the aging Spidey-Man versus Natman and Rotten. And this is written by Stan Lee, drawn by Marie Severin, and inked by Frank Giacoia, with letters by Al Kurzrock. And this story is just a funny story where Jonah hires this Batman and Robin character to try and take out Spider-Man, and so they have a little bit of a fight. And it's all goofy, it's fun, it's like 4 pages and such, and it is a snapshot of the time. There are so many cultural references in here, and I actually did an episode of my podcast on this book. If you look for the very first Not Brand Echh episode, my co-hosts and I go through each one of these pages, each one of the panels, and try to pull out as many of the cultural references and explain them as we can. Because I think the key to understanding these stories is to understanding the era. And if you get the jokes they're trying to make, it makes these issues more enjoyable. Otherwise, you're like, what the heck am I reading?
Yeah, that's how I felt. But, once again, it's really strange when you're not American, and most of those jokes, you don't get them.
Well, let me tell you,
unfortunately.
Most of these jokes I didn't get either. And I know I'm not American, but I'm North American, and we have the same TV and stuff like that. And still, a lot of these jokes I didn't understand. And I Googled a ton of stuff to find out, why are they making this reference? What does this word mean? What does that word mean? And it all, it makes sense in their context. There are some funny gags in here when you understand what it actually is all about.
The thing that I enjoyed is that it's not a Batman parody, it's a Batman TV show parody.
Right. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it was very popular at the time.
That's the only thing I got.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because you have the commissioner looks like the actor who played the commissioner in the TV show, right? Am I right about this?
Yep, totally.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it pulls definitely some stuff from the comics as well, but it is for sure an Adam West parody. I like at the very last panel as well, the Romita-looking Peter and Gwen and Mary Jane. Marie Severin, I think, trying to do her best Romita.
Yeah, works well. The Spidey costume in the trash also.
That's right.
To Spidey 50. Very good. Very funny.
Yeah. I don't know if we need to spend a whole lot of time on this one. If you want a more in-depth conversation, then I encourage you to listen to my Not Brand Echh episode, which you can find if you go to my website, epicmarvelpodcast.com, and click on the index link that's at the top of the page. You'll be able to find it. There are some bonus features in this book, a bunch of original art pages or photo stats of various pages from the issues collected here. All courtesy, it says, of Scott Dunbier, who works for IDW and is in charge of their artist edition line. And so he's done artist edition, John Romita artist editions, where you get all of this art reprinted at its actual full size, like 1-to-1. It's quite remarkable.
And I have to say that the first one was released a long time ago. There is a second one which covered the time of the Epic Collection 7. The time when Jerry Conway is writing the book.
Yep.
That's the one I've been lucky enough to buy. But as we record this, next March, they will release a much cheaper edition, a smaller size also, of course. I think it's called an artisan edition or something like that.
Artisan, yeah, that's right.
So it's a smaller version of the artist edition, and would give you a great look at those pages that we have here, and you can see the great look and feel and the details and how different it is compared to the original art we saw from Ditko in the previous edition.
One of the pages here is a page from Annual number 4 by Larry Lieber, and there's a note at the bottom of it and says, "The big fault here with the entire story is that, I can't read this writing very well, is that the villain could have been anyone. There's nothing in here that notes the villain's talents. So that's a good point. And I don't know if that's Larry's fault for the way he laid it out, or if that's Stan's fault for his plot or whatever. I don't know whose handwriting that is, who's writing that note, if it's Larry or if it's Stan. But yeah, they're right. Leading up to the big reveal, there are absolutely no hints. I mean, you can kind of guess because it's a movie set that it's Mysterio, but it could have been anyone. I mean, Green Goblin created a movie studio for Spider-Man in that one early issue.
I have there is something that I find really surprising about the unused pencil art by John Romita. You know, the one which is supposedly page 16 of Amazing Spider-Man 40.
Yeah.
It makes no sense for me. I've always seen that page and always felt that, first of all, that page, that moment is earlier in the issue. It's page 11, so it's not page 16 at all in issue 40. And when you look at the layout of the page and the way it's drawn, I mean, you can easily see that it's a different kind of Romita than the one we see in this issue.
Right.
Because the art looks almost like mid-70s, early 70s Romita and not mid-60s. You know, with the brush instead of the pen. It's thicker while he's using a thin pen when he draws. And I was always wondering where this page is coming from. Because it could be from, for instance, something which was rejected from the spectacular Spider-Man magazine that we will cover in the next volume. The one with the Green Goblin. So it could have been that, because for me it doesn't work at all with the look and feel of Spider-Man at the time.
But that magazine was printed in a different ratio, right? It wasn't comic size; it was magazine size.
Yes.
So, this page is comic size.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't know.
Maybe I'm overreading it, but it doesn't really feel like one of the. I mean, next to the, you can see on the opposite page the actual look and feel of the episode, and it doesn't look the same at all.
Right, and I think maybe that's because, though, that one's inked. That page is inked, so it is definitely different, because the other one is just pencils. Yeah. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know where it would fit. Maybe it was used for a flashback at some point or something. I don't know. Yeah,
it would have made more sense for me, but yeah. Anyway,
it's fun to speculate on that kind of stuff for sure. Absolutely. Well, there we go. We finished this one, and you know what? I don't think that I'm done reading John Romita's Spider-Man yet. I kind of want to go on to the next volume. So what do you say, Frank? Should we go on to volume 4?
Oh, definitely. No problem at all.
Okay. So let's do that. We'll be back next week with more Spider-Man, talking about the 4th epic collection, which is called The Goblin Lives. Check us out on Facebook and on Twitter and on Instagram. Just search for Epic Marvel Podcasts. You can also search for Epic Collections on Facebook and join my Epic Collection group. And don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel. As always, thank you, Frank, for being with us for this walk through Spider-Man. And we'll be around. We'll see everybody next week.
Bye, everyone. Take care.